Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I am Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
And we do post every week on a Friday, so do follow our continuing horticultural adventures so you too can become a horticulturalist, Stephen.
What a good idea. And don't forget that we do shorts every week as well. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask that I can answer in 60 seconds, pop it in the comments section below and we'll get around to your question in time.
And do tell us where you are in the world, because it does help Stephen formulate his cunning answer.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Now, the fragrance of this behind us, which is not the subject of our film, but where are we?
Well, we're at the Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens
Yes.
in South Yarra, Melbourne, and it is one of the world's great landscape gardens, and we're going to have a wee talk to the director today.
Very exciting. Now, this has been one of the places throughout the times I've lived in Melbourne that I've always come to for solace, for solitude, for beauty. I love it here.
I come here for plants. So I'm always...
A twisted horticulturalist.
Yeah, well, I am. I'm always astounded. I always find something that I haven't seen before. I always learn something when I come into these gardens. So maybe I just get too excited by plants to get solace and quietude because I'm so interested in the plants.
Well, what we're going to do in this film is meet the director of the gardens, but also just wander around and see the things. There's a bunch of very excited school children here too. And we're going to look at the things that have sort of struck our fancy throughout the garden.
Yes, what a good idea.
But before we go, we should tell everyone what this is.
Oh, yes. Gardenia thunbergia from southern Africa, one of the world's great perfume shrubs.
Oh, my goodness. If only you could smell it. Imagine Gardenia and dial it up by 100. Oh, my goodness. Well, if this is the beginning, what else are we going to see?
Lots.
Let's go.
All right.
Well, Tim Entwisle, Director of the Melbourne Botanic Gardens of Victoria, thank you so much for your time in coming to talk to us today.
Well, I'm pleased you've actually come to my home, or my garden.
Yes, yes, and what a garden you've got.
Indeed, indeed.
Remarkable. Now, first off, I guess we should start at the beginning a little bit. I know, and you know, that the Melbourne Botanic Gardens is one of the world's great landscapes. So we probably should get a little bit of history about, you know, where it started, who was involved, just those little things that will save people Googling.
Thank you. That's always helpful, Stephen. Look, it began in 1846, so we're just over 176 or so years old at Melbourne. Remember, of course, we're two gardens. So Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria has this beautiful Australian garden at Cranbourne.
Which we visited, which
Yeah,
was
we
wonderful.
have actually done some, yes, we've done some footage down there.
We'll link that bit.
Yes, so that you can see the other garden.
This garden, over 176 years old, designed really by William Guilford. So he's the master garden designer, and what you see today is very, very like what he created.
Really?
It's, you know, we add bits to it, we change them. And it's good. A botanic garden does change. I should point that out. It's not set in a particular period, but we're lucky in Melbourne, I think, to have the most beautiful botanical landscape, I reckon, in the world. It's very hard to find one with such a great design. So that's William Guilford.
Yeah.
But of course, he was our second director, and the probably another famous director here was Ferdinand von Mueller.
Yes, a well-known name, even overseas.
And we have a portrait bust of him, which we are showing up. He is right now covered in bird poo, which is appropriate, you know, that he's sort of at one with nature.
It's very hard to, well, it might be one of the birds he introduced into Australia.
Yeah, well, it could have been. He was one of those that was into the naturalisation group, wasn't he?
And sadly, also blackberries, so sparrows, blackberries, blackbirds for singing. He was trying to create I sort of, you know, you can sort of understand what he was doing, but we would now appreciate it was the wrong thing to do. But to introduce things, to make a walk through the bushland sort of enjoyable, you pick a few blackberries to eat.
Hear the bird
singing,
song.
yeah, just like where he comes from.
But having said that, though, he was a really, really knowledgeable and important botanist, was he not?
Look, he was, and I really got a lot of time for Ferdinand von Mueller. He and Guilford together really create what you see today. Even though the landscape is Guilford's, he began the investigation and sort of description, naming of the Australian flora, collecting around the countryside. He was a really good botanist and a prolific botanist.
And didn't he collaborated with a lot of people like Ellis Rowan, who went out to New Guinea, but also the north of Western Australia on her own in the very early 20th century?
Yeah, look, there were many collectors. In fact, many female collectors particularly worked with Mueller and collected material sent it to him. He had people, he corresponded around the world. He bought and brought 400,000 herbarium specimens to Melbourne from Europe and other great herbaria. So this herbarium here is full of these pressed plants going way back from all over the world. And that's because Mueller started the herbarium and then added to it with these world collections. So people come here from the Americas, they come here from India to look at material from those areas.
Isn't that fantastic? And I remember, I don't know whether it's a true story or not, but I remember being told once that Baron von Mueller had said that if Australia was to have a native rhododendron, he could point out where it would be, and that's where it was.
I've not heard the story, but it sounds about right, because exactly, if he would know enough about the flora, and he would know enough about the climate, the fact that to know that our rhododendron does grow just on those mountaintops in Queensland, and he did collect it, I think, and he did a lot of collecting himself up there. That's the other amazing thing, is the places he went to, and the botanists today still go all over the place, and I've done it myself as a young botanist, collecting material from obscure places and trying to represent, both in the Botanic Garden, living, but also in that preserved collection, as much of the flora as we can, and not just one of each species. So it's getting representation, variety, diversity.
Yeah, fantastic.
So what do you think, where are botanic gardens now in the world? What is their status? So they were pleasure gardens, they have been sort of scientific collections. What about today? Where are they in the pantheon of botanic cultural institutions?
Well, they are a cultural institution. That's probably the first point to make. They are part of, in Melbourne, for example, and the Cranbourne Gardens and Melbourne Gardens. These sit alongside the gallery, the museum. I think botanic gardens today, and the really good ones, are this combination of a cultural place, like we have here. They hold events, people come here to have parties and picnics, and they are part of that reason people come to visit a city. But also there's a conservation aspect. We are looking after the world's plants, and we do that through the herbarium collections, seed banking, propagation of native orchids, all kinds of things that you'd be very familiar with. And then alongside that, there is a scientific heart to it. So that herbarium I talked about that Mueller started, that's the herbarium heart of the organisation, and there are scientists working away behind the scenes mostly. So a great botanic garden today, I think, has to do all those things. They started as what we call physic gardens or medicinal gardens, the early European botanic
And we
gardens.
visited the system garden at Melbourne University, which is very much about science.
Very good example of that. And that's very close to what Mueller wanted in the garden here.
I'm glad that idea didn't gain traction, because I'm all about the pretty and the beautiful.
Yes.
I'm afraid.
Well, no. And I'm with you. And the interesting point about what Guilford did too is I think he combined both in a way. Because Guilford gets underrated as a plant enthusiast, a plant lover, and he loved the plant. So while you've got these lovely sort of voids and beautiful views and garden beds, within those are the collections of plants, and there are 20 to 30 collections, things like the big araucarias, the hoop and things.
Fantastic trees.
There are South African plants, there are medicinal plants. So those collections, Guilford was able to incorporate it into a bigger whole. And so people come here like you, they're attracted by the beauty of it, and then behind it.
Yeah, and then I come in because I'm attracted by the weird and wonderful plants that grow here.
And then you go and pick out, mistakes in our labels.
Yeah, well,
Like that. Yeah.
Well, that's part of the fun.
Look, it is, and in fact, I in some ways I don't mind, because that means you're reading the labels.
Yeah.
You're looking, you're working it out. That means you're taking that extra layer of information in a botanic garden. Not everyone has to do that.
No, Stephen.
In fact, we don't want everyone to be like you, Stephen. But,
Well, nor would I want that. Now, Tim, we've just come through, hopefully, a pandemic, and things have changed substantially in open spaces. What sort of impact did the pandemic have on the gardens here, and how do you see it evolving since that time?
look, it has changed. In some ways, it's reinforced things we already knew about how important these spaces are and how important a kind of complex space like a botanic garden is. I think the fact that we have a variety of plants, I've read a bit of research on this where it's even more beneficial to your health to have a variety. So a lawn and a couple of trees that are all is okay.
Yeah.
But a botanic garden really it connects, you go and look at the diversity, it sort of awakens your senses. So that's a positive.
And anecdotally, the first place I came to after the lockdown, when we were finally let out, Melbourne had a brutal lockdown, was here.
Yeah, as you should.
And we found some of the people coming in had tears in their eyes because they'd really missed the fact we did close on a couple of occasions. And when people came back in, they had really genuinely miss something they love, and we noticed that. So the gardens have become perhaps even more cherished and loved post-pandemic. And I think you've heard when you're out at Cranbourne that the numbers there of locals have increased dramatically from before the pandemic. So they're now more than they were, and we know that. Here in Melbourne, a lot of international and interstate tourists, so they're sort of returning now.
Yeah.
And we're just, if you walk around today, you hear more accents and more other languages. I notice almost every day you just start to hear that diversity of language, and people are coming back to have picnics and enjoy the cafes and things. So that's all starting.
It's all part of it, isn't it?
And look, we had a great, I should mention, a great event last winter, Lightscape, which drew in over 200,000 people into the gardens. That's on again this year. I think it'll do really well because it's outdoors and it's a beautiful place, and people want something to do where they feel just a little bit sort of more out in the open.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, I've got another question. I know that there has been a lot of planning done in the gardens here for the ongoing future of the gardens, taking into consideration climate change and all of the other things that we're now going to have to deal with. I'd like you to explain that a wee bit to me, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, it's something I think I could say we've been a world leader in, because we've set up an alliance which is now 500 botanic gardens around the world. And we began very early on this, and I think the droughts in Australia and the fires really pushed us along. But what it means is we plan a succession in the gardens, we call it. So we're looking at changes. So even though this is a beautiful looking place, trees die. We're replacing trees all the time.
We're actually standing amongst the corpse of one.
And this is so beautifully managed. We'll show everyone the footage. It is so exquisitely. It's like public art now.
It is, and it's a very natural thing too, because it's rotting. You'll see the fungi, the fruiting bodies.
Yeah.
It will decay over a number of years. We did not plan this originally. The tree near us, which is a 150-year-old white oak or white oak hybrid, fell a couple of years ago just after Christmas. It collapsed in one day, one half in the morning, the other half in the afternoon. And normally we'd whip that out, recycle the wood, all that kind of thing. But this time we thought, let's leave it here, almost as it fell, get some woodworkers in to make it safe, to create seats, and then plant. The important thing is, and relevant to your question, is we planted out new oak species. So we've got 3 new oaks here. One's from Texas, one's from California, one from Mexico. These are all what we think are climate adapted to Melbourne's climate in 2090. So whenever we plant a tree now, our only long-lived plant, we run it through a little database, and we look at where it's grown around the world, where it comes from naturally, and we say, will that thrive here? We don't think a white oak would actually do so well here anymore.
Yeah, so it's getting that little bit too warm for it.
Yeah, and the important thing is, though, that it has a particular purpose in the garden. So we'll plant things that might give the same landscape look. So Guilford could come back and say, that still looks like how I want it to look.
You haven't trashed my legacy.
I haven't trashed it all.
Yes.
It gives a bit of shade, people are happy. It might be a rarish species or one we haven't got in the collection. That's the collection side of it. Mueller would come back and say, I'm very pleased to see that.
Yeah, that you've got that species into the collection.
And sometimes we will, even if we want it, we have to have the same species for whatever reason. Maybe we're the only place that holds it or it grows well here. We might go and select one from a slightly warmer place in its natural habitat. So there's a lot of ways we can respond. It doesn't mean you don't replace like with like necessarily, but it's what the like means.
Yeah. Well, of course, a lot of plant collections that went on back in the early days were done by British collectors who were looking for things that were going to be hardy in the British climate. So they'd go to the higher mountains and the colder places to collect their provenances from, whereas we'd probably go the opposite way, would we not?
That's quite right, and we can go to those other places they didn't go. Although some of them was talking, it was actually Richard Barley, who you probably know, who used to work here, talking about Kew Gardens last night to our friends group, Melbourne Friends, and he was making the comment that plant collectors would go out around the world and collect just any old stuff, bring them back to Kew and expect them all to grow. Like, I'm more interested in, and you might appreciate this, Stephen, more interested in kind of getting the rare and the obscure than whether it would actually live in London. And now they're realising some of the things that were planted, the trees there, were never quite
quite right.
Well there. And now they're not doing so even worse.
Tell surprise. So here's a curveball. What is it a favourite plant or favourite spot in the garden? Because we'll have to let Tim go, but we'll go and have a look at it and try and figure out why it rings your bell.
Well, it is always tricky, but There's a rainbow gum I love, which is down.
Yes,
the
I love
sensory
that. And
garden.
I'm going to say something awful. It's not looking that great.
No. You can be quite honest because this is a director's choice almost. Because we planted 3 of these, and this goes against all that I said about.
Yeah, well,
climate
exactly. I was just going to say, what are you talking about climate
I'm
change?
getting hot and dry. It's a tropical
So
tree.
we planted tropical trees from the Philippines, one of the few eucalyptus that is native outside Australia, and I just love it. And that bark is spectacular. We've tried in the past, haven't succeeded. We planted 3, 2 died, 1 is there. It looks like it does at the moment for part of the year, and then it will look fantastic. I'm hoping eventually, and it's near the lake, so it's in a spot where we think it might do okay. So that's a tree I love. But interestingly, the spot we're standing now, this oak lawn and this particular installation, I love. I've got into oaks in the last few years. It was my pandemic kind of obsession. And partly because I work not far from this oak lawn, so I walk out through it in the mornings. I love the fact that it's seasonal, that in some of the trees are deciduous, the variety that some are not deciduous.
Yes, exactly.
The leaf shape. Like I love this part of the garden.
Okay, well, we will show everyone this part. We're in it now. What about you, Stephen?
Well, I have to say I've got a soft spot for the Fern Gully. I love that area of the garden. You can go in there in the middle of summer and it's cool and beautiful.
My favourite spot, which is contentious because I just told Tim off camera, is I love everything in the garden, but I particularly love the glass house. And I said to Tim privately, it's a little disappointing, Tim.
Yes, the house itself is. The collection's not bad.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've always, I've been here 10 years now, and I've dreamed of having a new glass house. And I really do think we could have a really interesting collection of sort of, I suppose, different landscapes, not necessarily just the tropical ones some arid plants. I'd love to grow welwitschia.
Yes, could we have a welwitschia?
Yes, the endless leaf.
So we're talking something sort of like a small version of the Eden Project?
Project or the glass house at Kew Gardens, something with a variety of habitats down by the lake. That's a plan. We've got a bigger priority at the moment, which is getting a new herbarium. So I'm focusing on that, but I would love that as soon as that's secured, we get a new glass house that it does look. Some people love that old.
No, I do. But I just want it to go on and on and on.
Yeah, it's just not big enough. It doesn't do anything.
To wonder for now. So, any philanthropists out there who want to fund a new series of glass
a new
house?
herbarium, then a new glass house.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's the priority.
Put it in order.
Thank you.
Put it in the messages below. We'll pass on your contact.
Thank you.
Tim, thank you so much for your time. It's a delight to meet you, and thank you for letting us wander through the gardens.
I'll enjoy it, and I hope you find your special places.
We will. And thank you, Tim, from both of us. It's been great fun.
Thank you very much. We'll go and find your sad rainbow eucalypt. Sorry, Tim.
No, give it a little pat.
The one at Melbourne University's not bad.
You shouldn't say that.
I don't like to compare.
Yeah, well, we will, because I'll go and have a look at yours now.
Okay, all right. It's okay. It's not as bad as you said.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right, good.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Lovely.
So, Stephen,
Here is my favourite.
the Fern Gully. Why
is-
is it? I mean, look, it's beautiful, but why is this so special to you?
All right, well, I can remember this Fern Gully going way, way back, where it was actually almost a slightly lost and sad piece of the Botanic Gardens. And a lot of effort's been put into putting in new boardwalks, replanting particularly the lower vegetation.
Yeah.
So now you come in here and you've got these enormous great towering palms,
Yes.
beautiful large old ficuses and auricarias, and then you've got the lower level of all of the interesting lower plants like the smaller ferns, all sorts of native things that grow in heavy shade. And it's just this wonderful, cooling, beautiful effect. And it sounds funny because there's a lot rarer plants in other parts of the garden, but because they're not in here so much, I'm not finding myself so engaged with just looking at the next rare plant. I'm just enjoying the atmosphere. So that's why I enjoy the Fern Gully so much.
And Melbourne is very hot in summer, and this is always a cool, beautiful spot. And even in winter, when it can get quite cold, miserable in Melbourne, it always feels lush. There are these beautiful heliconias, there's gingers, there's all these things that are surrounding us.
Yeah.
We could be in Queensland.
Well, we could be in
tropical
Queensland.
Australia.
And, well, in fact, it looks very tropical. I mean, the towering palms, apart from anything else, give it that wonderful tropical feeling.
Yeah.
And, of course, some of the slender tree ferns and things that are growing in here, the ulcifillas that used to be called cyathias, are truly beautiful specimens of their type.
Yeah. I think we're about to arrive at the spot where Tim's favourite sad tree is. Shall we go and look at that?
What a good idea.
Well, Tim Entwisle, Director of the Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens, this is the tree that is your favourite. Yeah.
Now, if I were Tim, I think I'd retract what he said before.
Oh, look, I get it. It is extraordinary. And we did look at the most amazing one in the Systems Garden. We'll drop in that footage now. It's a younger tree than this, but looking a lot happier and healthier, and only a few kilometres away. Just
Yes, it's
over the
over
road.
the way. And yes, I understand the allure to have Eucalyptus deglupta growing in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens. But if I was Tim, I would have selected something just a tiny bit more ornamental than that tree is at the moment.
I must say, actually, from this side, when we were walking on the other side, it looked half dead.
Yeah.
But this side, which perhaps gets more shelter, it's actually got quite good new foliage and looks quite healthy.
Yeah, so there you go. But it's not the most picturesque thing we've ever taken a picture of.
No. Oh, well, Tim, we love you for trying.
Yes, exactly. Well, Matthew, we're now in the conservatory at the Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens. What is it about this area that intrigues you?
I don't know. I think two things. Firstly, it's just other. You know, you can walk outside all the time and see beautiful things. But here we're in an environment that you just don't often see in Melbourne. Tropical greenhouses. The other thing is, as a child, I must have been about 5, we went to Kew Gardens as a family with my mother and grandmother. And I remember so vividly the hothouses and walking in thinking, oh my goodness.
I bet you didn't wear glasses back then.
No,
because mine are fogging up.
Our glasses are fogging up. And there's, I don't know, everything in here I just love. And it is so exciting to hear from Tim, from the mouth of the director himself, that there are plans afoot to develop Melbourne Botanic Gardens hothouses to increase their breadth in the collection. But it's a beautiful space. I just love it.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I remember visiting here when they had their giant arum in flower, the Amorphophallus titanium.
Right.
And there were queues lined up outside to come in and have a look at this giant corpse lily or whatever else you wanted to call it.
Yeah.
So it does have its visitations on a regular basis.
Well, this is just the most fabulous spot, so I'm very glad that it's here. And I'll be even gladder when there's a bigger one.
Oh, yes. And I expect to see something of architectural merit, not just something that you can put plants in.
Okay. Well, Stephen Ryan,
What a day we've had.
what a day. Can I just say, I am very lucky to meet all these amazing people because of you. So meeting the director of the Botanic Gardens was a wonderful thing and to have a chat with him. So thank you.
Well, it's always great to catch up with Tim anyway. He's also the patron of Plant Trust, of which I'm a member, so I get to catch up with him on a regular basis at some of our events and things. And yes, he's a very dynamic and interesting character, and I think he's been very good for the Botanic Gardens over the last 10 years.
He has. So a million thanks, Tim, for your time and for letting us wander through the Botanic Gardens today and seeing the highs and the lows. No lows, all highs.
Yes.
Apart from perhaps Tim's eucalypt.
Yeah, well, what can I say?
What can we say except good on you for trying.
Yes, exactly. So I love a tryer.
Well, this has been an amazing video, but what could we possibly do to top it, Stephen?
Oh, I have no idea, but we'll do our best, of course.
We will try, but if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to hit subscribe and find out. We post every week on a Friday, so you too can become a horticulturalist.
And don't forget that we do our shorts on a Monday. So if you've got a question or a comment that you'd like me to talk about, please put it down in the comment section below and we will try and answer all of your inquiries.
And do remember to say where you're from so it can help Stephen conjugate his wonderful answer to your burning horticultural questions. Thank you very much for viewing. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.